Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of June. On a side note, I feel like I need to let you guys know that my time has recently become a little bit tighter because I started a new job recently. Thank you. Really, thank you. You all already know that I move at a glacial pace when it comes to to putting content out. Nonetheless, if you notice any sort of difference in the quality or consistency, I apologize for that. Until I get, adjusted to my new schedule, things may suffer a little bit, but I'm going to do my best to not let that happen. So I would say that June was a pretty good reading month. I completed a total of 8 books with a grand total of about 3,200 pages. And interestingly enough, every book that I read, aside from one which I didn't rate, every other book that I read was either 3.5 stars or 4 stars for me. So I enjoyed them all nearly equally. So it would be very difficult for me to rank them in order from the one I liked the least up to the one I liked the most. So I think today I'm just going to talk about them simply in the order that I read them in. The first book that I want to talk about is the book that I did not rate, and I just kind of want to get it over with. And the book that I did not rate was My Dark Vanessa. If you aren't familiar with this book, which I'm sure most of you probably are, it is more or less a story about a high school teacher, a male high school teacher, grooming his female student. I think she's maybe 15. It's told from this girl's perspective, and it's about how it all went down and also sort of the repercussions that she has suffered because of it in the rest of her life. This book, in a word, it's gross. I think that probably the whole time I was reading it, my face looked about like this, like it does right now. Like it was just... My husband asked me after I read this if I liked it or if I enjoyed it, and I don't know how you can really enjoy this book. The subject matter, it's upsetting. It is upsetting, it's disturbing, and I can't, in all honesty, say that I enjoyed it. I think, though, that this book, it did what it set out to do. I think the author did what they set out to do, which, from what I can tell, that goal was to more or less inform the audience on a situation like this and how and why it happens. The book, it's told, the way it's written is very straightforward. It's not poetic in any stretch of the imagination. It is just unadulterated storytelling, plain and simple. It is fairly graphic. If you have suffered any kind of victimization, sexual victimization in particular, I would definitely warn you going into this, approach this book with a lot of caution. It has the potential to be, I think, very damaging if you've ever had an experience even close to what this was like. As far as a book setting out with a goal in mind, it accomplished that goal, and 5 stars in that regard. Enjoyment, though, I didn't enjoy it. I think that's about all I have to say about that book. Yeah, that's it. That's about it. The next book that I read in June was The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a sci-fi novel. It's just a short little novella. It was a fairly quick read. I was expecting something a little bit more dense or a little bit more challenging, but really this was a very, very straightforward, accessible little story, and I really, really enjoyed it. It is about a man who his dreams have the power to alter reality, and his shrink who discovers this and tries to, use it for his own greedy purposes. I thought that the concept was so clever and so inspiring. It was inspired. There were parts where I think the writing it got a little bit away from the author in some regards. It could get a little frilly. But aside from that, I think that it was overall very well written. I gave this book 4 stars. If you're somebody who doesn't normally like novellas, I would really suggest that you give The Lathe of Heaven a try. It has great pacing, it has great characters, great concept, and it's very imaginative. So yeah, 4 stars for The Lathe of Heaven. The next book that I read in the month of June was Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a sci-fi novel. It is a space opera. This is a story about a futuristic world in which the Earth has become uninhabitable, and one scientist in particular has sent off this chemical agent, or it's a virus, to this other planet to sort of help speed up evolution so that humans can escape to this other planet and repopulate. But of course, this plan for this sped up evolution goes awry, and it's about the remnants of humanity sort of dealing with that having happened. Honestly, this is actually the first book in a series, but it's actually really well self-contained. This can definitely be read as a standalone. It was a really fascinating idea. Although what I will say, one thing that kind of was a little tough for me to get through was the fact that this book doesn't have a whole lot of dialogue in it. I'm sure if you've read something like that, it can be really tough to get through that kind of writing. Nonetheless, I felt like the writer, he's a very good writer, a very impressive writer. I would definitely read more from him. I don't know that I will continue with the series. Like I said, this book, it stands alone really well, but this was definitely a worthwhile read. I gave it 4 stars. I highly recommend it if you like sci-fi, if you like space operas. This is definitely a must-read. The next book that I read was The Invisible Library by Genevieve Cogman. This is an urban fantasy. It is a portal fantasy, and this is the first book in a series. This book, it is about a world in which there are sort of multiple universes, and it's about a woman who works at the Invisible Library. They gather and curate books from various universes. It is about a librarian from the Invisible Library who is sent to retrieve a book in particular, and just overall just kind of the adventure that ensues. This was what I would call kind of like a junk food book, or like a breath of fresh air. This is the kind of book you would sandwich between those heavier, darker reads. And I will probably continue with this series. I don't think that I'm just going to read it back to back to back or anything like that. Overall, though, I gave this book 3.5 stars, which on Goodreads, I rounded it down to 3. Now, although I loved it and thought it was a whole lot of fun, whenever I rate books, I take into account how much a book affects me kind of on a deeper level. And this book didn't really do that. But this was a great book. Highly recommend it if you want a book that is just sort of a fun little adventure, steampunk kind of feeling, and also books within books, if you like that sort of a thing. I definitely recommend that you pick up The Invisible Library. The next book that I read in June was The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is also a sci-fi novel that is a space opera. By the way, in lieu of all of the space operas that I've been reading lately, I decided to I need to show you this for those of you that are fans. Anyway, so I read this next. If you like space operas, this is it's a must read. It's a story that is told from the perspective of a woman who is joining this crew on a ship that essentially creates, I guess you call them like wormholes between different regions of space. And it's about her just kind of joining this crew and fitting in. It's told kind of vignette style. There is an overarching plot, though it's not really the focus of the book. I would say the book is more about sort of these little individual stories that kind of happen along the way. If you like the TV show Firefly, this is basically Firefly. I would say this is pretty character driven. The characters are developed incredibly well. They are all so very likable. I think I gave this book 4 stars. I didn't like this book quite as much as To Be Taught If Fortunate. That book really meant something to me. It had a lot of significance to me. I don't feel quite the same way about this book, although I do enjoy it. I will continue with this series, but yeah, if you like space operas, if you like Firefly, if you like really awesome representation, then I definitely recommend that you pick this one up. The next book on the list is The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. This is the first book in a trilogy, the Chaos Walking series, I believe. I love his writing style and the themes he explores, and he does something which I really love in books, and that is sort of getting the reader quite disoriented. Like, there's a lot of intrigue in his books. This book, it is about a sort of a world in which there are only men. And not only are there only men, but they can all hear each other's thoughts. This book was very unsettling. It's not the same as this, but it made me feel quite similarly to the way I felt when I read The Golden Compass. It's not the same story or anything like that, but that while you're reading it, there's this kind of unsettling quality to it, this almost kind of uncanny valley thing going on. It really kind of made me feel uncomfortable in a good way, though. It's told in a first-person perspective, and the way that the character is telling the story it is told sort of the way he speaks, which is with a very heavy drawl, like a country drawl. And so it is written like that. And it kind of, I don't know, it would kind of get to me a little bit like, yeah, I got it. Like, I can't handle reading that for too long. It's a pretty big book to be like in someone's head, sort of thinking like that. I know that the author did this to create a certain effect and pulled it off for sure. It was just a personal preference. Overall, I really like this, and I will definitely continue in the series eventually. I gave this 4 stars. I think that, this book, it's fairly well loved, and I can see why. If you are intrigued at all by that description, then I would definitely recommend picking this up. Yeah. The next book that I read this past month was Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. I had put this to a vote in my TBR video. I put this up against Born by Jeff Vandermeer, and this won, so I read Senlin Ascends. This is about a man who takes his new bride to the Tower of Babel. And it has sort of this sort of steampunk Victorian kind of feel to it. This tower has all these different levels, and they don't even know how many levels there are. It's so tall you can't even see the top of it. Each level has kind of like a theme to it, really crazy, weird stuff in the tower. And this man, Thomas Senlin, gets separated from his wife and cannot find her. So this is the story of him trying to find her in the tower. Technically speaking, there is very little that I can complain about in this book. I understand why people have been showing it as much love as they have been. For me, though, I rated this 3.5 stars, and that, as far as the writing quality and all the technical things going along with it and the idea and all of this, it was just perfect in many, many regards. However, and this was just me, I didn't particularly connect with it. I thought it was fun, but I don't know. I didn't really connect with it on like a personal level in any way. I think at this point there are 3 or 4 books out. Maybe the 4th book was recently released. I might continue with it. I don't know. We'll see how I feel about it. However, don't let that discourage you whatsoever. If you're interested in this book, you should definitely pick it up. I think I'm kind of the oddball, having not connected with it in the way that everyone else has. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt, like truly take that with a grain of salt. This is a very good book, objectively speaking. In most of you, if you read this, if you haven't read it yet and you read it, you will probably really love Senlin Ascends. The final book that I read in the month of June was The Blacktongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. And I read this because I wanted to participate in a live discussion, which is happening on the 7th. It's happening on Tuesday. Hopefully I get this video out before then. And I hope that you will come and watch that and join us. It's going to be on the channel. Steve talks about books and stuff. It is about a man who, he is a trained thief, a very good trained thief who tries to steal some money from someone that he tries to rob someone that he should not try to rob, and ends up kind of getting enmeshed with this person's, their journey and their situation, and, you know, adventure ensues. I thought that it was, very well written. I thought it was quite clever. The idea, the characters were very likable. I don't want to go into too great of detail about this, since I'm going to be, you know, discussing it on the 7th, which, like I said, I really hope that you'll all come and join us over there. I don't read a whole lot of high fantasy, honestly, so it can take a lot out of me to put that much energy into sort of, you know, constructing this idea, this story in my mind. So, you know, in that regard, like most high fantasy that I read, it was a little challenging for me. I think that it could go on some tangents in places. That being said, this is really an enjoyable book to read, and especially if you enjoy high fantasy, I would definitely recommend that you pick this up. I gave this 3.5 stars. And yeah, I think that this may be the first in a series. I'm pretty sure it's set up the way it ends. It's definitely feels like it's leading into a second book. So I'll be very curious to see where the story goes, and, you know, if we learn more about these characters and kind of getting to know them a little bit better. So I think that is going to be it for me today. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. Have you read any of these books? And if you have, what did you think about them? I'd also be really curious to know if you had any particularly awesome reads this past month. Please let me know down in the comments below. I am always looking for my next great read. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will give it a thumbs up and possibly subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Bye.